Your Creative Push, episode 72.
Keep going, keep pushing, just don't give up and just keep shooting. The more you shoot, the more you're going to fail, and the more you fail, the more you're going to learn.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Clay Cook. Clay began his creative career in the music industry, and after 10 years, his passion had leaned towards photography, cinematography, and graphic design. Constantly collaborating with fresh designers, national models, filmmakers, and other photographers, Clay has built a reputable name as an award-winning, internationally published photographer and filmmaker, specializing in editorial and advertising photography. Clay, brother, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Young man, you're my man. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, man. I was wondering if you could start out by telling me a little bit about your music career, because I think that's really interesting, and the story about how you transitioned then into photography.
Sure. So at the age of 16, I basically got with a group of friends of mine. I just gotten into playing guitar, and we started just playing local clubs and local bars and venues and things like that. And it sort of just transformed into something that, okay, these guys are actually pretty good. We wrote all of our original music. And around the same time, I started doing graphic design to design our own show flyers to promote the band. And I eventually moved into touring with other bands, and then they needed graphic design. So in tandem with the music, I did graphic design. But we went from, playing these small clubs at bars to playing huge venues and arenas all over the United States, and playing from anywhere between 5 to 25,000 people at a given time. And then we did really well on the record side of things. I think we capped around 50,000 records over the course of like, I'd say, an 8-year career. 4 of those were touring pretty hardcore, meaning in a van with 5 other dudes, and it was an adventure constantly. But yeah, it was a great time. It was an amazing time. But around I would say around 2010, the band split, and that's when I decided to go graphic design full time. And I picked up a camera to shoot stock photography. That was my original intention with the camera. I had no other reason behind it, but just to shoot stock photography and try a new thing. And then it snowballed and exploded for me. So that's basically was how I transitioned. It went from the music to graphic design, and eventually into the photography world.
That's pretty cool that the love for the graphic design came from kind of trying to advertise in that whole aspect of the music, which is really cool.
It was, we just, the whole thing behind a band is your brand and how you perceive to be to other people. Like, perception is reality in the music business. So important to have a good logo and have a good flyers. And it wasn't good at first, needless to say, but I got better and better at Photoshop. And another thing, when you're in a band, you're also broke and you have no money. So It was so important for us to cut corners. And that was one way to cut a corner, was to learn Photoshop. And so that's what I did. And I learned Photoshop and InDesign and Illustrator, and really, dove into those programs until people were like, dude, you're actually really good at this. I have this band. Can you do this for our album artwork? And then that eventually led into doing a lot of labels. So I worked with Universal Records, I worked with Atlantic Records, I worked with Metal Blade Records on a lot of their bands and their band's album artworks. And there's stuff that, honestly, I look back on and I'm like, wow, this is pretty terrible compared to, but at the time, like, it was pretty cool stuff. But that whole time I was playing music and I was touring really into it hardcore. We did a lot of shows, and it was a great time.
Do you still do music like as a hobby now? Like, has it kind of transitioned into more of the hobby?
I picked up the guitar about 2 weeks ago, and it felt like an ancient language. Unfortunately, it's really unfortunate thing. But
so it wasn't like riding a bike.
Yeah,
It
was it requires practice. Guitar is something that requires practice and requires something to constantly do and to constantly like get better and improve at. And when you don't touch it for a while, you can kind of get lost in that. But I still enjoy it. All my friends still play music, and like all the guys I was in the band with, they still play in like cover bands or they play on their own. And every now and then we'll get together and play an old tune, and it's fun. And then we go back, about our regular lives, which my life
Right.
is completely different from theirs. Most of them have kids and they've grown up and married, and I'm still single out here, just working really hard, trying to bust ass and hustle.
Very cool. Yeah, I really respect that about you, is like your ability to pivot. What suggestion would you give to somebody who, is doing one art form, whether it's music or writing or photography, and they kind of want to pivot into something else, not necessarily to leave the old thing behind, but like to kind of like start something new.
Well, the beauty in creativity is that it covers a whole wide umbrella of different topics, such as painting, graphic design, there's photography, there's music, it's all creative realms. And I think that for me, photography was just as fulfilling and rewarding as music was. So, just as graphic design was as well. So, I mean, it was something that when I transitioned in photography eventually, it was just as rewarding as music. Although it was a completely different business in a completely different world, it still was still as rewarding and fulfilling creatively. So I think for someone that's transitioning between the two, I think you have to know and you have to stick to your passion. And that's really important, obviously, but dabbling in those other areas doesn't hurt at all. And I think that it's would only improve your self satisfaction, if you will. So it would only improve your life. I think if like I love dabbling in graphic design still, or like I'd love to paint or draw or something like that. It's that's really cool to do. And I think it's important to do those things as in order to avoid creative burnout as well. Like
Mm.
I can get burnout really easy in photography, but if I just pick up guitar or pick up another creative like graphic design or something like that, and it kind of helps alleviate that a little bit.
Absolutely. And you mentioned one kind of resistance, like burning out. Are there any other things that kind of hold you back on a daily basis from doing the actual creative work?
Hmm. A photographer, in the photography worlds, I think it's important that you have to be a businessman and a marketing person first before you're an actual photographer in order to do it full time as a career and to succeed at it and to make it, make money, and not just as a job, but as a career. You have to really be a business person and a marketing genius really to really succeed, especially in today's day and age when there's so much photography out there, but it's still so important. Yeah, so like I'm constantly battling playing that role over a creative artist. So I spend most of my time answering emails, responding to questions, building relationships, networking, marketing, social media. All that stuff is almost a higher priority than the actual shoot itself. I spend more time in a pre-production state than I do in a production state or a post-process production state. So I think that is what burns me out almost more than shooting itself, is because the shoot only, shoots last, are short in comparison to what we put in before it, the
Hmm.
pre-production, the meetings and all that stuff. So I think that was definitely one thing that's a challenge for me to constantly keep up with, and is just the business and the pre-production side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the kind of busy work involved with the things surrounding the actual core of what you're doing it for.
Right. And now it's like the post process is such a crucial role, especially if we're doing compositing or we're doing face replacements or, using back plates or whatever it might be. I think that post process plays a crucial role. So I have a great staff of people that do that for me. And I've had to contract that out now because it's been so aggressive with the contracts lately and the shooting and everything else. So,
Well, I'm glad that you get that help. I can't wait to be able to send the editing of the podcast to somebody else and do it that way, because
right.
that burns me out as well.
Yeah.
It's just like you want to just be all I want to be doing is talking to people and then connecting with talking to artists and then connecting with the people that are kind of inspired by it.
Absolutely.
But it's hard to do with all that other stuff
It
that
is.
goes
It's
along
it's
with it.
hard to yeah, it's hard to keep up with. a lot when you're kind of a one-man show. So luckily I have a great staff of people that help me out and allow me to balance both work and life.
Very cool. So can you take me back to like when you like first kind of picked up the camera and started doing the photography? Like where, like at what point did you know like this is for me? Like I love doing this, and kind of how did you develop your style from there?
So when I first got into photography, I was shooting everything. I was shooting families, babies, portraits, weddings, like all that stuff. I
Mm-hmm.
shot my friends mostly at parties. I would throw parties just to shoot friends on a cloth background in my little office that was like a 5 by 5 room. It was almost a closet that I was like sticking these people in and shooting and photographing them because I
What's
was
that invite look like?
it was just like, hey, let's party. Let's have a few
Yeah.
drinks and some cocktails and just let me photograph you. I don't care who you are. You're my friend.
Right.
And I just was instantly enthralled with the quality of a DSLR. And like, I was
Mm.
so used to editing other people's photos. Like I did that with the graphic design world. Like people would send me photos and I'd edit them or put them in album artwork or composite them or do whatever. And I was so used to doing that when I was actually the creator of the image, it was so much of a different feeling for me that I didn't care who I shot or what I shot. It was just so exciting for me. And then that's when the editing sort of part started taking a back seat, because I started just getting a lot more creatively fulfilled by actually being the creator of the image or the creator of the final product, if you will, rather than just a piece of the puzzle. So, yeah, I shot friends at parties and we did just really awesome stuff for a while. And then it was went into a very experimental mode where I started finding light. And then I dabbled when I first got a speed light. I didn't actually know that you could take a speed light off the hot shoe of the camera. And so I knew that you could take it off with a TTL cable or like one of those cables that, you just kind of can hold next to the camera. But when I went to the camera store, I was like, I want to take this light like way away from my camera so it gets a like way more cool creativity, like way more dramatic lighting. And I asked for a 50-foot TTL cable, and they just laughed at me. They were like, "Really, dude? Well, here's some wireless technology where welcome to the new world of
Right, right.
stuff." And I was like, my mind was blown that you could do that. And so like there was a lot of those stories along the way where I was like, I had no idea what I was doing. Like I had never done it before. I had just never breached this world. And so everything I did was self-taught and was done by just failure or just asking someone or watching somebody. So, for me, that's how I kind of really got into the world of lighting. And then the world of lighting, dramatically really introduced me into models and into the world of fashion. And that's how I got into fashion, which eventually got into editorial and advertising work, just because I then progressed beyond the families, babies, portrait stuff, and I got into the creative lighting, which is what these magazines really look for, and what these brands look for is they look for dynamic, interesting, unique photographs that no one's ever done before. Not sort of they can get a lifestyle photographer all day, but they really want something that's unique that they have and it's special to their brand. So that's kind of where I came in, and people started picking me up for it. So that's when I started making a lot more money than I did in graphic design, and I eventually referred all my graphic design clients on and off to one of my buddies, and then took on photography all the way. So
Well, that was nice of you to give your buddy the clients.
like, yeah, I mean, it wasn't even a passion for me at that point, like I was always like kind of okay at graphic design, I was like decent. I did good work and people paid me for it. And they're like, this is awesome. Like a lot of people thought it was awesome, but looking back, I was like, man, it wasn't nearly as good as what I'd produced on the photography end, which I'm extremely confident about. I'm like very confident in the work I produce for my photography, but graphic design was always something like I'm okay at, and same with music. Like I was a good guitarist, but I wasn't like, Jimmy Page or anything by any means. So
Do you think that the skill level is kind of related to the confidence level, or also like the passion level?
I would say so. I mean, I don't know, because I was always really obsessed with music. I wasn't obsessed with graphic design, but I was obsessed with music, and I took it really far. With music, I was always more of a showman. Sort of, I loved the engineer part of it, so I loved recording music. I liked that end, but I was never the lead guitarist. I was always the rhythm guitarist. And so I put more into the craft of business, marketing, engineering, and the live aspect more than I did in the actual guitar playing. I was more on that end because I managed the band. I was the booking agent. I played, a lot of different roles in the band, and I was basically the go to guy for all the contacts. And so not only was I doing that, but I was also working on the live shows and everything else. And so I kind of left the music portion, uh, up to the other guys, even though I was the co-songwriter for much of the music. I was more played a more managerial role, if you will, in
Hmm.
the band. And I think that going to photography, I found that being more confident allowed me to concentrate on the creativity portion a lot more than it did music.
I guess you would say that like where you're at now with your photography, your style, and kind of your business, that was never quite the intention when you started. Like, did you see yourself exactly where you are now, or did it kind of just you kind of kept going with what you wanted to learn about and kind of the things that intrigued you, and then ended up there?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because I remember a conversation I had at a restaurant with my roommate at the time, and he was like, we were shooting weekends. Like we would just go out and scout locations and shoot on the weekends just for fun. Like when I first got my camera, this was in 2011. I first got my camera, and we were just going out every weekend. I remember having a discussion, like, and I was having so much fun with it, but I was like, how can we make money off this? I was like, man, these guys charging weddings make a ton of money. I was like, and I always wanted to do something. My dream was to just be my own boss. Like at the end of the day, through the music, through everything else, graphic design, I just wanted to be my own boss. And I was like, I remember having a discussion with him. Was like, we could just make a lot of money through weddings and stuff. But I had no idea that. I mean, so when I first got into it, I didn't really have an idea of how far this would take me creatively or how far it would take me in any sort of direction. But I remember that like I just knew that I could make a success out of myself somehow, whether it was through whatever venture I take. But no, I had no idea that I would be anywhere close to where I am now shooting this stuff, because it's just insane. Like it's been an insane few years. I only went full time 2 years ago. Well, not even 2 years ago, and I've only been shooting for 5 years. So it's been a really intense few years that has been a roller coaster, and I wouldn't take it back for anything. And I would say that I never really had a clear, concise business plan of the direction I was going to go. I just kind of took it one step at a time and then found out what I was good at and where the areas I lacked, work at the areas I lacked, and then kind of compensated either way. So
Very cool. And like, what would you say to, 5 years ago, Clay, or somebody who's listening that's kind of in that same spot? Because I think that's really inspiring. Like the fact that you've only been doing it, shooting for 5 years, and then you've only been doing it full time for 2 years. That you can start at really any time and kind of incorporate it into your life. So, what advice would you give to your former self? That doe-eyed dreamer that's kind of thinking about
right.
jumping into photography or whatever art it may be.
I'm asked this question quite a bit, and I think that it's unique that you say myself. What would I say to the guy 5 years ago? And the biggest piece of advice I can give to somebody that's just starting out in photography or talking to myself 5 years ago is just to shoot. And I know that's vague, but it's so true. It's just you have to shoot, because the more you shoot, the more you're going to fail. And the more you fail, the more you're going to learn. And so by me shooting a ton, and this is exactly what I did, I shot everything. I shot so much stuff. I explored the realms of every sort of type of photography and really dove into all elements of photography, and I shot a ton, and I found what I liked by doing that.
Hmm.
I found what I don't like. And then I kind of was able to niche my way into one sort of style over the course of the first 3 years, 2 years of shooting photography. And then I just focused hardcore on that. But I shot almost every day when I first started. I mean, it was obsessive. And I think that leads to another thing is like you have to really be obsessed with your craft, and because you have to work so hard. And so my biggest piece of advice is like, man, just shoot every day and work really hard for it, and then be obsessed with it, because you have to these days. You have to be unique to you. You have to stand out from a pack. The good news is that photography and these creative realms will always be here. Everyone will always need photography. Everyone will always need graphic design digitally, and music will probably always be here in some form of fashion, whether it's electronic or whatever. And so my job's secure. I'm very secure in that. However, it's going to be something where there's more and more people in that creative space. So you have to be unique, and you have to be more of a standout than ever, because that's what people will pay for.
I love it. I love it. So much good advice in there. And the one thing I definitely wanted to touch on is, like you said, to not only do it obsessively, but to try new things and take photos of everything you can think of, or whatever it may be. If you're a painter, like try different styles and try different things until you really find that thing that you're really passionate about and can become really obsessed, focused in, and then, like you said, find your niche and then be able to go from there.
Yeah, and it's so important that I experiment, and I'm constantly stepping outside of my comfort zone. I always want to be outside of my comfort zone. As soon as I just do a shoot that it's like I'm I'm just absolutely lazy and I'm positive with what's going on, then that's when you're going to start producing subpar results. And as a matter of fact, I've seen a lot of photographers get worse over the years because of the fact that they never truly step outside their comfort zone. And so I try to do with every shoot, I do something different. I do something unique. I change things. I experiment in realms that I haven't ventured in before as much as I can, even if it's the smallest subtle thing, such as like shooting high to low, which is something I rarely do. Even if it's that small little thing, then that can really change the game and, also lead to failure, which now not to do that. So it's really important to constantly be outside your box, because that's where you're really going to start learning stuff and never getting comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And once you start to get comfortable, it will start to kind of feel like a job, and that's kind of what you want to avoid.
Right. And it can lead to some serious burnout that way too.
Absolutely. You got to keep the mind always interested. So
absolutely.
And kind of speaking about that, I read that you you have many late nights on YouTube. So, because I have that too, especially like when I'm researching artists, like I'll have an interview the next day, and if I ever sound tired the next day, it's probably because I like just got sucked into like, just dove into like all their different work and then explored and just immersed myself in kind of the universe that they've created with their art or music or photography or whatever it may be. So can you kind of talk about that? Because I that really piqued my interest.
Yeah. So of course, when I first started photography and even graphic design or anything else, like YouTube tutorials and just YouTube information, even though there's a lot of noise out there, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of personal opinions. But I think that I spent a lot of late nights just watching tutorials, watching YouTube tutorials, trying to research, figure out how things were done, how to dramatically light something, how the big people do it, how does Annie Leibovitz and how does Norman Jean Roy and how does all the people that inspire me, how do they do this? How do they light this? How do they work this camera? And so there's a whole mass of information readily available on the internet. And I think that people want things handed to them these days. And there, a lot of people will be willing to pay for that information, but it's out there. I mean, it's out there. You just got to go chase it. You got to go find it. And so I spent many late nights just watching tutorials and information on how to shoot things. And I would get up in the morning and, either A, I would call in sick for my day job, or B, go on my lunch break outside of my work in my khaki pants, because I was doing IT, and then I was doing the band thing and just trying to make money and pay for bills. So yeah, I would just go out and experiment in what I learned the night before. And so that's really how I learned. And that, as well as assisting other photographers, building relationships in that world, and seeing what other people do, and watching and just soaking in things like a sponge.
Soak it in like a sponge. I love that. Yeah. And I might have called in sick today. And
Dude,
I might
I
do it
mean,
tomorrow too.
oh man, like
Yeah.
it's
Right before I got on with you, I called out.
it happens so much because it's not our
Yeah.
passion. Like, like you gotta pay bills and you gotta really do that. And it does really take a lot of hard work to get to a point where I am. And I did the day job. I cut carpet. I worked in the warehouse. I did the blue collar work for a long time. And then I eventually got more smart in the marketing realm. And then I did marketing for a while, all while I was doing photography, graphic design, and playing music. And so I
Mm.
would quit my job a lot to go on tour. And then I would come back. We'd be here for maybe 2 months, work at some sort of dead end job or something. But luckily, I had a great job that for a number of years I could leave, go on tour, take a leave of absence, and then come back. And while we were here stationed recording or whatever we did, practicing, playing shows, traveling regionally, I worked a day job all while I was shooting photography, which was, that music were my passion.
So what would you say to, because that's really tough. It's a tough thing to
It's
do,
a tough balance. Yeah.
especially when you are kind of like spending your free time not watching TV or not like being lazy and doing the art and the fulfillment, like the creative fulfillment. And especially when you're doing that, I think it's really hard then to wake up the next day and go to the job that you do not care about, that has nothing to do, that it doesn't fulfill you in any way. So how did you kind of get through that?
That's tough. It is tough. I mean, it is hard. For example, a good friend of mine, he's very involved in the world of gaming. He's involved and he's got so many passion projects. He loves cooking. He loves doing that kind of online and teaching everything. But he works a day job that he's just miserable at. And sometimes I'll see him and he's like, well, I got to go into work. And it's just a miserable thing for him.
Hmm.
And so many people just trudge through life like that. And the thing with me is that again, it comes back to just being that obsessed with it that I will be my own boss. I will take my life and be in control of my life. And I will do this and I will work and do whatever I have to do this. And so there was a lot of times when I would go to my day job, I would work it, I would get through the day, and then I'd go home. I would work constantly all night on different things. And it was so hard for me. And honestly, I made a lot of sacrifices. I burned through a couple of relationships by doing that, just by because I didn't have time for anything. I didn't have time to do it because I was so passionate about being my own boss, whatever creative realm that would be in. I was just obsessed with it, and it was something that I had to do, and I did not want to. Work in a warehouse. I did not want to do IT. I did not want to do marketing for a living in the corporate space. I did not want to be a 9 to 5er, and that like I said, it was tough. It was a tough balance, but I did it, and then I eventually made the transition to full time, and that was a tough jump. It was something where I was eventually making more money by doing photography than I was at my day job, and that's
Mm.
kind of when I knew that okay, I can make the jump here. And then there was about a year of transition there where it was tough. I had to really save money and I wasn't doing the clients like I was now, like the high end, big budget clients. I was still in the editorial space, like doing preset flat rate budgets. And it was tough transition there for a while. But it got better and better because I continue to work hard. And I think that is the foundation of everything we do is not only working hard, but having loyal relationships, and then, of course, delivering a great final product.
Love it. Clay, we're running out of time, so it is time for the final push.
All right.
And this is where I ask you to kind of reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already inspired today. That's thinking maybe I could do this too. And maybe they are doing it too, but maybe they need the inspiration to kind of find the time to do it. And give them your best advice and really push them into action.
At the end of the day, I think that what's going to get you to where you want to go is going to be one, hard work, being obsessed with your craft, and then just shooting and really getting outside your box, and never being in a comfortable space. And something that I've kept in my back of my mind is to just never, never, ever give up. And
Mm.
that's so true. Is like, even when you're going to be the lowest of the low, the brokest you've ever been, you're going to be depressed. You're not going to have any money. And it's still, you have to keep in the back of your mind, like, keep going, keep pushing, just don't give up and just keep shooting, because the more you shoot, the more you're going to fail. And the more you fail, the more you're going to learn. And the more you learn, the bigger clients you're going to get. In turn, the better clients you're going to have. So you got to back all that up with a great product. And photography is not really about the technical know-how. It's not about the gear. It's not about any of that stuff. At the end of the day, it's about your eye and your mind, and creativity always leads to clients. So the more creative you are, the more clients and the better clients you're going to have. Again, and the better clients you have, the bigger clients you have, and vice versa. So just don't give up, guys.
Don't give up and keep shooting. I love it, man.
That's right.
Clay, man, thank you so much for coming on the show today and for giving us that push.
I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And you can find Clay on his website, which is claycookphoto.com. On Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter, he is Clay Cook Photo. And on Facebook, he is Clay Cook Photography. And you should also check out his blog, which is clay-cook.com. And all the links we talked about today will be, of course, on the show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/claycook. Clay, brother, thank you again.
Hey, thanks, man. This is awesome. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Wow, thank you so much, Clay. I just love these super talented people who are amazing, and Clay's photography is amazing, but they're amazing at this one particular creative field, but they got their start in a completely different creative field, like absolutely my favorite, because they have the bravery to dabble in something else and kind of let their intuition take them to where they're supposed to be. And so what? If you try to do something new and it turns out that you hate it, notice I didn't say not good at it, because you most likely won't be good at it right away. It's all about finding the love for it. So what if you're not the best at it? I guarantee you will learn something from doing it. And at the very, very least, you will prevent burnout, from whatever else you might be spending all of your creative juices on. And of course, it's totally important to stay focused and not chase, just any shiny object that comes your way. But it's also really, really important to expand your horizons, because you never know if your true calling might be some offshoot of what you're already doing. And what you're already doing is just kind of this first stage of the journey to something else. Your gateway drug into creativity. Be brave and take chances. And actually, if you are somebody that has done this, if you're somebody that kind of got your start in something completely different than what you're doing, or you've made some change where your path kind of took a hard right or a slight right, hit me up. I want to hear about your story. I really do. It's fascinating to me to see artists and creative people that just got onto the pathway of creativity, doing one thing, and let it take them wherever it might take them. So yeah, please comment on the show notes page, yourcreativepush.com/claycook, or send me an email, youngman@yourcreativepush.com. I would love to hear from you, honestly. On tomorrow's show, we have Carrington Schaefer.
I'm happy when I can sit down and write a paragraph. To me, that is winning, and that is to be celebrated. And I think we think it's all in the grand gestures. Oh, if I can sit down and write, 50 pages, well, maybe that's not very realistic. So what about celebrating the small victories instead?
Carrington is a fellow podcaster who has a podcast called Honestly, Dear Listener, which is a really great complement podcast to this one. She talks about all the doubts and uncertainties that come from being a creative person. In her podcast, she is completely honest and open, and she even plays some of her voice memos, which I would never do, I don't think. I would have to get really brave or really drunk to share some of the things that I say into my phone when I am alone. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for her, and she was an awesome guest on the podcast, so I definitely suggest you check that out. But that is for you tomorrow. Hopefully today you were inspired to go and get your work done, so go and get it done, please. That is my goal in life, is to get you to do your work. Thank you so much for listening. I love you all. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being a friend of the show. Thank you for inspiring the people around you. Have a great day. Get your work done, and we will see you tomorrow if you need the push again. Have a great day. Bye.